Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual education program at Cancer Support Community South Bay. I'm Rebecca, the program manager, and I welcome you to this workshop titled Fasting and Cancer with Create Cures Foundation. Before we begin, if this is your first time joining us, CSC South Bay's mission is to ensure that all people impacted by cancer are empowered by knowledge, strengthened by action, and sustained by community so that no one faces cancer alone. We serve the South Bay, Long Beach, and Orange County area all at no cost. Our program includes support groups, networking groups, healthy lifestyle classes, social activities, and educational programs like this workshop. Educational programs are open to all. If you'd like to hear more about our services or join a community, please visit our website at cscsouthbay.org. Without further ado, I introduce our workshop speakers. They are from the Create Cures Foundation, which is a nutrition and longevity clinic based in Santa Monica, California, and provides dietary and lifestyle guidance to support cancer patients throughout their treatment journey. Jessica received her master's degree in nutrition, healthspan, and longevity from USC and is continuing her education through the Institute of Functional Medicine to deepen her understanding of how addressing the root cause of illness can therapeutically treat pathological disease states and promote optimal health. Katie obtained her Bachelor of Science degree in diabetics, nutrition, fitness, and health from Purdue University and a Master of Science degree in human nutrition from Texas A&M University. Thank you both for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. It truly is a pleasure to be here with the Cancer Support Community, South Bay. We're really excited to talk about the topic of fasting in cancer, which we understand there's a lot of information out there. Maybe some of it is accurate, maybe some of it is less accurate. So we are here to share the research, share what fasting entails, the effect on the body, the effect on cancer. So we're really excited to share all this information to empower you. As Rebecca mentioned, we are coming from the Create Cures Foundation, which is a nutrition and health span clinic in Santa Monica. It was founded by Dr. Walter Longo, who is one of the leading researchers on longevity, fasting, and nutrition in the world. He has a cancer institute in both Italy and in LA. And we work to integrate the findings from his research as well as the findings from his colleagues directly into clinical practice, working to support cancer patients throughout their treatment and beyond. And so as we get started here, first we want to know, why do you want to learn more about fasting? What inspired you to attend this workshop today? Are there specific topics within the umbrella of fasting that you want to learn about? You're welcome to locate the chat box and share your answer with all of us. Some people haven't tried fasting, looking to see how to support conventional treatments. Absolutely. The appropriate way to do it, the link between fasting and apoptosis, fasting with chemo. Interesting question, fasting in type 2 diabetes. Pathologists have recommended it. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Some of those questions were more so questions that we would like to address at the end. Just for you to know, we are going to dedicate the last 10 to 15 minutes of this workshop today to doing a question and answer session. So if you have any questions, try to keep them a little bit more broad. We're not going to be able to answer any questions that are very specific to your particular case. Save those towards the end, and then you can pop them in the chat box when we get to that portion of the workshop. Great. Okay, so just to look at what we will discuss today. First, we're going to talk about what is fasting, the different types of fasting. We'll talk about the cancer research that exists, also the safety considerations to make. We'll talk about intermittent fasting and a daily supportive diet that can be paired and complement fasting. We will finish with a quiz and Q&A. first, we would like to know, what fasts or fasting regimens have you heard of? Have you tried any fasts or fasting? Maybe people have tried them. Someone shared that they used to fast in cancer life.
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of fasts out there. I'm sure you all have heard of something. Nice, FMD.
Intermittent diet, intermittent fasting, 12 to 13 hours.
Amazing. Intermittent fast.
Okay. Now, Katie will start to dive into fasting and the different types of fasting that exist.
I'm really impressed with everybody's responses, and thank you all so much for taking the time to take care of yourself, to be educated through this workshop today. This is quite an important topic in your treatment protocols going forward. It sounds like a lot of people have some pretty significant goals, and thank you for being here. Yeah, when it comes to fasting, gosh, there's so many different types of fasts. It seems like a lot of you have heard of the much more researched fasts, the FMD, intermittent fasting, 12 to 13 hour overnight fasts. That's fantastic. Also, I get a lot of people juice fasting, water fasting, the master cleanse, right? There's so much fasting going on in the media, and I'm really excited today to help you feel really clear what's a safe and effective way to fast. Dr. Walter Longo, he coined this: not all diets are the same. So not all fasts are the same either. Just because you say, oh my gosh, I ate today. Oh my gosh, I fasted today. Well, what are you eating? How are you fasting? What exactly are you doing with this fast, right? So it's really, really important that we're clear the timing, the different macronutrients, the different micronutrients, making sure that we're actually doing something that's well researched, rather than just saying, oh yeah, I'm fasting, and thinking that that's beneficial. Okay. So let's get to the bottom of this. What is fasting? Fasting is voluntary abstinence from all or some kinds of food or drink. It's the switch from burning glucose or blood sugars for energy to burning fatty acids and ketone bodies. And there have been shown to be many, many benefits to fasting, including cellular repair, fighting inflammation, and protecting against oxidative stress. So how does fasting work? Especially with my cancer patients, I explain to them, hey, we are trying to turn off or at least down regulate. We're not trying to completely turn off, but we'd like to down regulate your growth signaling pathways. As grown adults, if we have a cancer diagnosis, the last thing that we want to upregulate is more growth, right? When we're signaling growth, we could be signaling growth of cancer. So fasting has been shown to be incredible at down-regulating growth. And here I'm going to point out a couple of different metabolic pathways that fasting has been shown to affect to help to down-regulate growth. One is insulin-like growth factor. If you've heard of IGF-1, our livers secrete insulin-like growth factor in response to concentrated sugars, right? Added sugars in our food, concentrated proteins. We used to think that the more quote unquote complete proteins, like the animal proteins, the proteins from eggs, maybe you grew up thinking that these were really, really healthy. But now we know that because these proteins are so well packaged and so readily absorbed, that actually they may be absorbed quite quickly and signal growth factor release, as opposed to a plant-based source of protein that's a little bit less complete. This won't signal growth factor spike as much, right? So insulin-like growth factor, once we down-regulate that, will be not only turning down the volume to signaling growth, but also helping to potentially decrease our biological age, right? And decrease inflammation and other things as well. Also toward the target of rapamycin. So fasting really down-regulates this. This is another signal for growth. And basically down regulating this helps to increase autophagy. I think some people mentioned apoptosis. Autophagy is programmed cell death and helping to kill off dead and damaged cells and cells that might be mutated. So down regulating that is going to help a lot. And then protein kinase A, this is a key gene that needs to be shut down for the body to get into that regenerative mode. And fasting does also down regulate protein kinase A. And this, it results in cellular maintenance and protection, increasing stress resistance pathways, of course, removing damaged cells, as I mentioned before, with apoptosis, and reducing inflammation. So incredible, especially in regards to cancer. Okay, so hope you all are paying attention. Please open up your chat boxes. What is one benefit of fasting that I mentioned? What pathways are we down regulating here when we're fasting? It's okay if you don't remember the exact things, but generally I'm curious. Apoptosis, yes, autophagy, cellular renewal, down regulating insulin-like growth factor, yes, decreasing inflammation. Fantastic. Great job, everybody. Yeah, there's a lot of benefits. However, it is important that we're doing this properly. Sometimes the risks might outweigh the benefits. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Here, this research article back in 2011, Dr. Walter Longo traveled to Ecuador, where he was studying this very unique population of individuals with what's known as Laron syndrome. Laron syndrome is an insulin-like growth factor receptor deficiency. And you would think that maybe this insulin-like growth factor receptor deficiency, these people, they're not going to be able to grow to normal height. They're not going to be able to grow muscle as easily either. However, what's so fascinating about this group of people, they'll eat anything, and it seems like it's extremely rare for them to develop diabetes, to develop cancer, to develop heart disease related to this growth factor hormone receptor deficiency. So we do have a video for you. I'm not certain if it's currently working, and if it's not working for us, I really do encourage you to watch it because it's really interesting seeing them go through the population in Ecuador and explain this even more. Do you want to try to see if that next slide works?
It unfortunately is not working today, but
Okay, that's fine.
We can follow up with the link to the video. Otherwise, you can Google Walter Longo, Laron syndrome, growth receptor deficiency, and you will likely find a lot of actually probably podcasts, interviews, and news articles on that.
Yeah, I just quickly want to explain what happened in the video. They were just going through these different individuals with Laron syndrome and noticing, oh my goodness, this is incredible that we can take this knowledge and see what can we do with our lifestyle to down regulate insulin-like growth factor, because clearly there's something to this to prevent disease and to prevent aging and of course cancer growth. So in discussing what is fasting, there's two different types of fasts: intermittent fasting versus prolonged fasting. Intermittent fasting, it's less than 24 hours, something like alternate day fasting. Maybe you have one day where you're not eating any food, and then the next day you're going to be eating. Usually that only lasts like 2 or 3 days out of the week. Also, time restricted feeding, or TRF. It seems like a lot of you are very familiar with this. This is an overnight fast between the last bite of food that you eat after dinner and the first bite of food that you eat in the morning. We recommend that cancer patients have an overnight fast of 14 hours and a 10-hour eating window during the day versus a prolonged fast. So prolonged fasts are more than 2 days, and this looks like a water fast or a fasting mimicking diet. I'm really excited to get into the details of this. So water only fasting, this is a type of prolonged fasting. It's abstinence from all food and drinks except water, usually done for about 3 or more days. And this has been shown to be beneficial, getting the body into ketogenesis, which we don't want to overdo this, and we'll get into this a little bit more. Of course, reducing inflammation and autophagy, as mentioned previously. However, there are many risks to water-only fasting. Surprisingly, one of those risks is actually dehydration, increased gallstone risk, lower blood pressure. Some people, we don't want to have that risk of standing up and passing out because of such low blood pressure. Blood sugar dropping very low, loss of muscle mass. And this is really scary. When we're losing muscle, we don't want to lose bone mineral density. We want to be able to regulate our blood sugar. So we want to keep that muscle mass. That's very important. Also, nutrient deficiencies, fiber deficiencies really affecting our gut and our ability to decrease inflammation and have our immune system working properly. It's important that we feed our gut microbiota with fiber. And it's quite low compliance. And as I just mentioned, potential negative impact on the microbiome. So professional monitoring with water-only fasting, because of all these risks, it's very important that this is something that is monitored if done at all. And because of all these risks, Dr. Walter Longo did come up with this fasting mimicking diet, which I'll talk about in a second. It's really incredible, the research going over, okay, with chemotherapy, can we see any positive effect with fasting, with water-only fasting? And yes, 72 hours of fasting before chemotherapy was shown to have, people were shown to have less side effects, less nausea, less vomiting, less major decreases in blood cells, less major decreases in neuropathies, this is awesome, right? The only thing is that there's so many risks associated with this. So going on to the next slide, it's going to be important to notice, okay, we don't want to fast too much. Just because something has been shown to be beneficial, too much is not a good thing. This could increase our stress responses, increasing cortisol, lean muscle loss, inability to build muscle, infertility, hormone issues, nutrient deficiencies, electrolyte imbalances, weak hair and nails, sleep disturbances, depression, anxiety. We don't want to overdo it with fasting, okay? And looking at this, even if something is medically supervised, if you've heard of the True North Health Center, this is an incredible health center where they do medically supervised water fasts. There's still a long list of adverse events related to their water fasts, even if it's medically supervised. Okay, so because of all of these risks associated, Dr. Longo, how can we possibly make it so that people can comply with this? People can actually do this. Is it possible for them to maintain their muscle? Is it possible to have less nutrient deficiencies related to fasting? Could we get the same benefits while eating? And yes, Dr. Longo developed the fasting mimicking diet. This is a plant-based meal plan that's high in essential fats, lower in protein, quite calorie restricted, only about 700 to 1,000 calories a day. And it includes all of the supplements that you'll need for that 5-day meal plan. And there are even more potential benefit to eating and feeding our gut microbiome, and less risks. So just to go over it a little bit more, this 4 to 5 day specific plant-based diet and supplements, it nourishes the body while achieving the same effects, protecting healthy cells. So we refer to this as differential stress resistance. And this is why it's so amazing to combine this with chemotherapy, because our healthy cells are becoming stronger when we're in a fasted state. And especially when we're fasting with food, we're going to be able to, actually feed our gut and actually not be so high at risk for muscle loss or for nutrient deficiencies. So our healthy cells become healthier, and sensitizing cancer cells to chemotherapy. So differential stress sensitization. So the chemo is actually going to do its job at affecting the cancer cells, while our healthy cells are much more resilient. And it's really, really cool when I have patients who maybe 10 years ago went through chemotherapy and have a recurrence and are working with us. They often say, wow, I'm so excited and grateful for this fasting mimicking diet. I really noticed a significant difference in the side effects. It's so, so, so neat. However, this does require a doctor's approval and professional recommendation. We don't want just, people to overdo it with this, as I just mentioned. And these photos paint a pretty good picture of what it looks like in the fasting mimicking diet kit. It comes with snacks like olives and bars and some soups. And it's very, very clear, very well laid out, and has been able to be used in clinical research. So it's very specific in this diet plan. So water fasting versus the fasting mimicking diet, is this really something that's comparable? Is it going to be better? Studies have shown yes, compared to 72 hours of water only fasting compared to a 5-day fasting mimicking diet. The fasting mimicking diet had much more positive, significantly beneficial effect to blood sugar, to insulin, and of course to insulin-like growth factor, which is a huge thing, as we mentioned before. All right, this is a very interesting study. If we look at mice that were induced with an irritable bowel disease like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, the mice that were having the protocol of the fasting mimicking diet versus the water only fast, the mice that had the fasting mimicking diet, they not only reduced the symptoms of the irritable bowel disease, but they really reversed the intestinal pathology, because those mice having the fasting mimicking approach, the fasting mimicking diet, these mice had fiber that were feeding their healthy microbiome. So they were able to actually reverse the condition. Whereas the water only fasted mice, yes, it definitely helped. It reduced the inflammatory markers, but it did not reverse the pathology completely. And I want to read this quote: diets low or lacking carbohydrates and dietary fibers have been shown to significantly decrease colonic cancer protective fecal metabolites, with mitigation seen after switching to a plant-based and semi-vegetarian diet. So with that, you can see that, hey, you must eat some fiber. Eating that plant-based matter can really, really help with buildup of cancer protective fecal metabolites. Okay. Here's an image of what I'm talking about. You can see on the left, water only fasting. Yes, decreased inflammation, very helpful. However, the fasting mimicking diet, it decreased inflammation, but it also increased the protective microbiota because it included that fiber, which actually reversed the pathology of the condition.
Thank you so much, Katie, for breaking down the different types of fasting and why water-only fasting wouldn't be recommended, especially for extended periods of time. And I do want to be clear, we're definitely not promoting a product by any means, we're promoting research. So when we're referring to the fasting mimicking diet, we're referring to this clinically tested dietary pattern that has been shown to be extraordinarily beneficial for patients with cancer and especially those receiving standard of care therapy. This is used as an adjuvant therapy in combination with the standard of care, whether that's chemotherapy, radiation, immunotherapy, hormone therapy. What's really exciting is we have clinical trials to demonstrate the efficacy as well as the safety for all of those different types of treatments. So it's not specific to one type of cancer or one type of treatment. It really works on a fundamental systemic level to revolutionize the tumor microenvironment. And what occurs here and the mechanisms behind this, Katie introduced these different effects, but I just wanted to go a little bit into further detail just to further explain. So there's this dual effect that's extraordinarily beneficial for any person that's going through cancer, because there's this upregulation of stress resistance. So for those normal cells, when they are in a fasting mimicking diet state, those healthy cells can sense that there isn't energy readily available. The body typically runs on glucose as an energy store, which you might have heard of before. When the glucose levels are not circulating at high enough levels, the body is able to recognize this. And then there's this switch that happens. The body metabolically switches into a ketogenic state, burning fat for fuel. In that process, when the body is not able to receive enough energy as it readily does, it goes into a conservation mode. So typically in daily life, we are in more of a growth mode. But in this fasting state, there is this change into a conservation mode where then the healthy cells are able to upregulate the stress resistance pathways. So upregulating the antioxidant pathways, upregulating the different resistance pathways, where they're able to develop this shield against the toxicity of whatever that standard of care therapy is. So in the clinical trials and in our clinical practice, we've seen that a lot of patients who combine mimicking diet with their standard of care therapy experience significantly less side effects, because those side effects are a result of the toxicity really hitting your healthy cells. And so there also is decreased DNA damage to those healthy normal cells. And there's an upregulation of the processes that Katie mentioned, autophagy, which essentially is a cellular recycling. The healthy cells are able to recognize any sort of damaged cellular components or damaged DNA, and then they're able to use those for fuel and then become even stronger, even healthier. All of this happens simultaneously while the cancer cells get stuck and weakened, because unlike the healthy cells, cancer cells are already mutated. And so they're not able to make that metabolic switch. They essentially recognize that there isn't enough glucose, the IGF-1, even insulin that's circulating around the bloodstream. And so they become super, super sensitized to whatever that toxic therapy is. So they already are weak when the chemotherapy, the radiation, the immunotherapy, or the hormone therapy comes in. It's even more effective. That standard of care therapy is able to get even more cancer cells. And this can be extraordinarily beneficial at any point throughout the treatment process with your oncologist's approval, but it's extraordinarily helpful at the beginning of your treatment, because essentially what this helps to do is the fasting mimicking diet helps to enhance the efficacy of that standard of care therapy so that it gets as many cancer cells as possible at the very beginning. And then we've shown in clinical trials that it reduces the risk of cancer cells becoming resistant to that standard of care therapy, which can be really challenging when the cancer cells get to that state. And I know that we've mentioned many clinical trials, but I do want to say that we have about 20 human clinical trials that exist with a range of different cancers, a range of different therapies, and many, many hundreds of mouse and cellular preclinical studies. I do encourage you to look at a website called clinicaltrials.gov if you're interested in seeing what clinical trials are currently recruiting patients, if you are interested in potentially participating. We have, I would say, around 20, 30 clinical trials currently ongoing around the world, everywhere from LA to China and everywhere in between. So definitely take a look and see if you qualify for any of the clinical trials if you are interested. Let's say you would like to integrate the fasting mimicking diet into your treatment. We recommend first speaking with your oncologist. And we've found that presenting them with the research has been the most effective way in sharing with them how this could potentially be a helpful adjuvant therapy for your current protocol. There are these 3 papers that among about the 20 clinical trials that are really representative of the rest of the research. This trial, this Vernieri trial on the left here, that was in Cancer Discovery and published in 2022, looked at over 100 different cancer patients with 18 different tumor types receiving the various standard of care therapies. There also is a case study report of 5 patients who participated in this trial and had advanced stage cancer and achieved complete remission. And that paper is called Ligorio et al. 2022, if you want to look into that. The Valdemarin from 2021 was a trial that looked at about 90 patients with 16 different tumor types, range of different standard of care therapies, demonstrating the safety and efficacy of the fasting mimicking diet with treatment. And then the Tanya Dorff paper on the right from 2016 looked at how platinum-based chemotherapy can be effective for breast cancer patients. So this is definitely one to consider and to discuss with your oncologist. I wanted to share a clinical case that just to share with you what the effects can be with integrating fasting into your standard of care protocol. This is actually a personal patient of mine through the clinic, and she responded very well to the fasting mimicking diet, and in combination with the daily sustainable longevity diet that we recommend. She is a 52-year-old female. She came to the clinic with stage 4 metastatic colon cancer, height 5'7". She started out with a weight of 129 pounds. In April, she previously was 143, really, before the diagnosis. Sorry, that's supposed to be 2023. So her BMI was 20.2, and she was diagnosed originally in February of 2023. She had the colon resection surgery, which is pretty standard. And then she started chemotherapy. The chemo agents were FOLFOX Erie, if this is one that you're familiar with. She started in March, and she received a 3-day infusion every other week. And as I mentioned, she combined the fasting mimicking diet, longevity diet, as well as exercise, which is very important. So she received 5 cycles of her chemo, combined them with the fasting mimicking diet. She was able to maintain her weight, which was really important, as well as her muscle mass. This is something that's really critical. So any weight that is lost throughout the fasting mimicking diet, it's essential that that weight is regained if you don't have the weight to lose, just because we want to make sure that you aren't following this downward trajectory. Also, I mentioned it's really important to maintain muscle mass, because muscle mass is critical for your immune function, for blood sugar regulation, as well as providing that structural support. So we want to make sure that that's maintained. It's also much harder to regain muscle than it is for fat. So we often use body composition analyses to track and monitor patients' progress throughout treatment. And she had shared with us that she experienced significantly less side effects than what she had anticipated, including she had no diarrhea, very mild constipation. Her hair really wasn't falling out, definitely not as much as she had expected. She only had mild nausea, but not enough to take medication, which is very rare, especially those chemo agents, that cocktail FOLFOXIRI, which is can be quite strong. Also, her liver enzymes are returning to normal. So as I mentioned, she received her original diagnosis in February, and then her PET scan mid-May showed that she had marked improvements, and that some of the lesions were completely resolved. And then she had a follow-up PET scan in June, which showed no evidence of disease. And she just shared with me that she had a circulating tumor DNA test done on October 5th of this year, and she continues to have no evidence of disease. So this is a really wonderful story to show that I think Katie would agree can absolutely be representative of many of the patients that we see going through their standard of care treatment and combining it with these additional adjuvant therapies. So now I have a question for you. Based on everything that we shared, is it possible to achieve the benefits of fasting with food?
Looks like you're all paying attention. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Excellent. That is correct. And that really, just to reiterate again, the fasting mimicking diet was developed because Dr. Longo, who has researched fasting for over 30 years, understood, okay, we see immense benefits with fasting, but how can we allow people to benefit from fasting without exposing them to those potential extraordinarily detrimental side effects? And so you might be asking, is fasting appropriate for me? Well, it depends. There are a lot of different factors that we consider whether in determining whether a patient actually would be a good candidate for the fasting mimicking diet. We cannot emphasize enough how important it is to take an individualized approach. We consider diagnosis as well as prognosis. We're going to consider age, height, weight history, body composition, gender, allergies, intolerances, any sort of sensitivities, medications, other chronic conditions. I mean, we really are considering the full picture here. And again, just wanted to emphasize that we only recommend the fasting mimicking diet if a patient's oncologist is on board and approves. So now shifting into discussing intermittent fasting, which is something that can be done on a daily basis and would complement any sort of additional therapeutic fasting regimen. We recommend 14 hours of intermittent fasting nightly. So that might look like you finish eating at 7 p.m. and then you have breakfast the following morning at 9 a.m. So allowing your body to rest and recover and rejuvenate for 14 hours overnight. Studies have shown that autophagy, once again, is upregulated, that process that helps to reinforce and strengthen your healthy cells. And you might be wondering, why did we land on 14 hours? Well, there has been research to show that 12 hours can be beneficial, 13 hours can be beneficial, especially in this Women's Healthy Eating and Living Perspective study that looked at thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of patients, where they found that patients that fasted 13 hours or less per night had a higher reoccurrence of breast cancer compared to those who fasted 13 or more. So you might be thinking, okay, is more better than why 14? Maybe I should do 16, maybe I should do 18. Again, this is where that super individualized approach comes in. For the general population of people with cancer, we would not recommend extending beyond 14 hours because this is where you can really stress your body, especially when it's done consistently, daily. And through that stress, it actually can increase cortisol, which can then increase your fasting glucose levels, which is counterproductive to supporting cancer treatment. Also, extended fasting can really stress the gallbladder, and studies have shown that it actually can cause gallstones. So we don't want to invite any of these additional risks. We really want to maximize the benefits without any of those potential detrimental issues. So 14 hours is what we recommend. As I had just shared, there's some research to suggest that around the 16-hour mark and beyond, there's an increased risk of gallstones. Also, if you're going 16 hours or longer, even beyond 14 hours, you likely are going to be skipping breakfast because we recommend allowing 2 to 3 hours between your last bite of food and when you go to sleep. And so if you're allowing that time and then you're fasting 16 hours, you're likely going to skip breakfast, which is not something that we recommend. There's been a lot of research to show that people who skipped breakfast have an increased risk of all-cause mortality. So that's something that we definitely are mindful of, and we always want to recommend eating breakfast. So for a daily diet, we recommend something that Dr. Longo developed called the longevity diet. It is loosely follows a Mediterranean diet pattern, but it's a little bit more specific. And he based this on multiple pillars. So he looks at clinical trials, so those with human subjects. He looks at preclinical, looking at those with mice as well as cells. He looks at epidemiological data, looking at large populations of people. He looks at centenarian studies. You might have heard of the blue zones where the longest lived people live. He looks at those dietary patterns. Then he also considers complex systems. So through these multiple approaches, he's developed the longevity diet, which is plant-centric, but does include a little bit of fish. We recommend fish about 2 to 3 times a week, focusing on the fish that are going to be highest in the beneficial omega-3s, as well as lowest in heavy metals. And that includes salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. We emphasize complex carbohydrates, so healthy legumes, as well as whole grains, a little bit of fruit. it's important to include those in the diet. Some people think that you must avoid all carbs. That definitely is not something that we recommend, because a ketogenic diet, although it has been shown to be beneficial for very, very specific types of cancer, ketones actually have been shown to be a cancer growth factor as well. So we always want to kind of tread this balance between not spiking glucose, but also not putting the body into a really severe ketogenic state. It's a moderate protein diet, again, to be mindful about the stimulation of those growth pathways, IGF-1 levels. And we recommend avoiding any sort of added processed sugars, limiting processed foods as much as possible, so that you can include more whole foods, more nutrient dense foods, so that you can get the majority of your nutrients from your food and not just supplements. Again, individualized approach is paramount, extremely important, because when we're developing an individualized strategy, we really like to consider it a comprehensive strategy. We're looking at the frequency and the duration of the fasting mimicking diet, if this is a therapeutic approach that we're recommending integrating and your oncologist approves of. We would be monitoring muscle mass throughout, as well as weight. We would be looking at a bunch of different blood biomarkers. We would be considering micronutrients as well as cancer growth factors. We would be looking at phase angle, which essentially is a measure of cellular health, and measures your cell's ability to react and respond to stress. Fasting mimicking diet being a stressor on the body. And then also, when considering daily diet, we consider protein amount, protein timing. We consider the percentage of daily calories coming from carbohydrates versus fat, types of fat. We're looking at activity, movement, types of movement, duration of movement, timing with food. It all can be very, very specific. And that really is our specialty in what we recommend that you do, because everyone is different. And if you read a headline, it's really important to not think that just because you read one article that it might be applicable to you and your situation. Other benefits of fasting properly include it can help to reset hunger and satiety. If you find that this is a challenge for you, it helps to reset cravings. A lot of people report that they have decreased sugar cravings after the fasting mimicking diet. We shared the many anti-tumor effects and the increase in autophagy as well as longevity. There are populations that we recommend avoiding fasting: patients who are underweight, standard of care therapy. If they are underweight, have very low muscle mass, then we are not going to recommend that they combine the fasting mimicking diet with their treatment. Also, those with disordered eating, we would not recommend the fasting mimicking diet. Active infection as well, which is very important, because during fasting or the fasting mimicking diet, the immune system is actually slightly suppressed. It's during the day after the fasting mimicking diet or fasting when you refeed. So no caloric restriction, but you're feeding your body with nutrients. Your organs, your body is actually rebuilding because there's stem cell proliferation that occurs. And then we can actually see a boost, a proliferation in white blood cells in the immune system, as well as sometimes red blood cells as well. Also important to address that for those with pre-existing medical conditions such as type 1 diabetes, advanced liver, kidney disease, and heart failure. I know that someone mentioned in the chat, this is very briefly, we could really dive into this as a whole separate webinar, but type 2 diabetes, the fasting mimicking diet actually has been shown to be beneficial in terms of helping to reduce a person's need for insulin. However, this is a very specific case, is going to require the endocrinologist as well as the oncologist, if they have cancer, to be very closely involved in monitoring and making sure that the patient is very closely watched. So I want to make sure just to address that and share that. Okay, so last question here before we move into a little quiz. Should you continue your normal exercise routine while following the fasting mimicking diet? What do you think? Yes. Yes, gentler. Yeah, exactly. So I would not recommend any sort of very rigorous exercise, because what Katie had shared, even with the fasting mimicking diet, your blood pressure could potentially slightly decrease. We do recommend very light resistance training, just so that you're able to maintain your muscle mass throughout those 5 days. But we definitely would not recommend like running or doing, a cycling class or a HIIT class or something like that. Gentle walking as well as light resistance training. And just a quick note on this, there actually was a clinical trial that was done on patients with breast cancer who were receiving chemo, and they combined their chemo with the fasting mimicking diet, and they did light resistance training for about 20 minutes a day, nothing super intense, just very light body weight exercises, and they were able to not only maintain their muscle mass, but even grow their muscle mass. So that is really exciting, and also proves that our body needs less protein than I think many of us think to build and maintain muscle mass.
All right, I hope you all were paying attention. We've got a quiz for you in the chat box. In what ways has the fasting mimicking diet been shown to be more beneficial and safer compared to water-only fasting? Any ideas? Microbiome. Yes, that is a huge one. It's a huge one. Number 2, fasting is not recommended for which individuals? Is it for everybody? Can everyone just do a fast? Or are there some people, some populations that maybe would not benefit? Yeah, if they have an active infection, better outcomes in the metabolic pathways. Type 1 diabetics. Yeah, if you're malnourished, underweight, pregnant, nursing good. Yes, yes, yes. And lastly, what are 3 benefits of fasting that we talked about today? How exciting. This is huge. This is so incredible, the research that's out there on fasting and cancer. And I'm excited that you're getting clear on this. Autophagy, yes, programmed cell death, helping to slough off dead and damaged mutated cells, getting rid of those, cleaning up house. It's a huge benefit of fasting. Down-regulating growth factors. Yes, the growth signaling pathways. Exactly. Decreasing the side effects of chemotherapy. Helping with neuropathy.
Thank you everyone so much for listening. It sounds like you've taken a lot away, as well as for your participation throughout the workshop today. We really appreciate that. So I do just want to finish up before we move into our Q&A by sharing that we are both dietitians at the Create Cures Foundation Clinic in Santa Monica. And we offer programs that allow us to collaborate and work with patients over a longer period of time, which we've found to be the most beneficial, because really there's only so much we can do by having one-off appointments here and there. It really takes developing a comprehensive support and strategy to be able to follow you over long periods of time, because treatment might change, weight might change, blood biomarkers might change. And so with that, we really adapt the strategy. Also, we are a team of dietitians, and we have a molecular biologist who is a part of our team, who offers a lot of her experience and insights into the strategy. And we even offer the opportunity to involve Dr. Longo directly into your care if that's something that you're interested in. If you are interested in seeing us for nutrition guidance, you're welcome to reach out to the clinic at createcures.org, and we will get back to you. We have a website, which is listed here, as well as our YouTube channel, which has a range of different webinars that we've previously recorded. And just as a reminder, today's session will be recorded. Oh, and I do want to address that someone just shared. Is nutrition covered by insurance? I want to share, we are a nonprofit organization, and so we offer sliding scale fees for those who qualify, even ranging up to 100% off, so free services. So I do encourage you to reach out, even if you don't have insurance, or if you're concerned about your financial resources. We always look to find a solution because we want to offer care to as many people as possible. Okay, and then these are our references. So now, unfortunately, we only have 7 minutes left. There's so much information to share, but we would love to move into the Q&A portion of.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica and Katie. I think the first question started at the clinical trials, when you talk about the case studies, I mean. So it's a little bit long, but if you want to go to the chat at 12:36 p.m. from iPhone Jan Steve. Can you explain how FMD potentially works with adjuvant endocrine therapy for breast cancer following surgery and radiation, etc.? Because reduced estrogen continues to quote unquote starve all estrogen receptors in the body. Thought bladder glands device over 5 years. How does the FMD help? Just through rejuvenation and strengthening of normal cells, even though they will not be receiving estrogen stimulation.
Yes. Okay. Very good, very specific question. So what's really interesting is we are now seeing in multiple clinical trials that the fasting mimicking diet does help with different hormone therapies. So different breast cancer, hormone blockers, as well as androgen deprivation therapy for prostate cancer. In terms of specifically the mechanism, I'm not going to go into that because that's extraordinarily detailed, but encourage you, if you're looking for breast cancer trials, I encourage you to look up the trials by, the first author is Tanya Dorff. We've done a few with her. And so it can help to support the treatment by helping to get even more of the cancer cells. I'm sorry that it's this would take a whole hour to unpack.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So I think this is when we're talking about the 3 case studies. What is considered active treatment? Has there been trials looking at fasting and aromatase inhibitors, CDK4/6 inhibitors only treatment?
Yes, there has been. I'm forgetting the exact clinical trial name off the top of my head, but I do recommend just looking up, or if you send an email to the clinic at createcures.org, I will find that trial to you and send it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm just seeing a question here. Did the case study get steroids during the infusion? So I do want to be clear. These are patients that truly went through the standard of care therapy. So standard procedures, they receive steroids and everything. This is typically part of the normal protocol. So yes, they did.
I think this is the last question regarding to the 3 case studies. Can there be any conclusions made going the other way? If the patient does not have bad side effects from chemo, does it imply anything about their diet?
Katie, do you want to jump in here, or do you want me to take this?
I feel like I'm a little confused by the question, to be honest. Like, if they don't do an FMD and they don't have side effects from chemo, I guess, yeah, that could tell us that maybe they were eating really, really healthily. And this actually kind of ties into the last 2 questions. I think it's important to witness it's not just about what you're eating during the FMD and during chemotherapy infusion, but also in between, making sure that you're eating a plant-based diet there's actually compounds in specific foods that have been shown to really help kill, especially breast cancer stem cells. There's research around this. So when it comes to you decreasing your side effects of chemotherapy and you're not even doing fasting, wow, that's amazing. It could be because you're eating a really healthy diet, but I am curious to hear your answer to that, Jessica, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. I do also think that there are different chemo agents that tend to have different effects on the body, and people tend to have different responses. Like, I know for some drugs, it's very common, like over 90% of patients lose their hair, or there are some drugs where nausea can be really extreme. So like, there's definitely not a one size fits all. I think that if people in general have lesser side effects, then it probably is a testament to their healthy lifestyle. However, it doesn't mean that their healthy cells are not being affected by the chemo and its toxicity.
Thank you. What is the preferred amount of protein per day?
So this is where the individualization really comes in. We would want to know your body composition. We would want to look at your muscle mass. We would want to look at your IGF-1 to see how stimulated your growth pathways are. There's a U-shaped curve that's associated with IGF-1 levels. So we don't want IGF-1 to be too high, which means that the growth pathways would be too stimulated and there would be proliferation of all cells in the body excessively. But also, we don't want IGF-1 levels to be too low, which could indicate there isn't enough stimulation in the body for growth, which then increases risk for bone loss as well as muscle mass loss. We also consider age, gender sometimes, any other chronic conditions. There are a lot of factors, so it's hard for me to say just a general answer.
Thank you. Do you need to be in SoCal to come to Create Cures?
Katie, do you want to answer?
You do not. There are some states that we cannot see if you live in certain states. But if you live in a green state, it's really interesting how it's from state to state. The laws are different, whether or not we're able to see you through telehealth. But I see patients virtually through a lot of different states across America. So
yes. And also we have a clinic actually that is based in Italy that's allowed to see the rest of the world, including those red states. And we follow the same protocol, the same approach. It's like our sister foundation. So if you do happen to live in one of those states, then we can absolutely offer virtual support as well.
Wonderful. How regularly would you recommend doing the FMD post-cancer?
This is, again, individualized answer. We generally say like 3 to 4 times a year just for maintenance. But again, that could vary depending on your age, your weight, the type of cancer, any results, things like that. So it is dependent on each person.
There's a question about asking about ketogenic actually downregulates apoptosis. Does ketogenic or at 12:54 from Eric.
So when it comes to ketosis, I get this question a lot. And yeah, there's very, very specific cases like brain cancers, glioblastomas, where cycling into a keto approach has been shown to be beneficial. We do need to be very careful, though, thinking about all the research that I was just sharing about when you're doing a water fast and you're not taking in any fiber, how that really affects our microbiome. A lot of people who go about a keto approach or a keto diet, they end up exacerbating heart disease because they're taking in such high fat. So instead of thinking that we're really going to boost those ketones, get into a ketogenic diet, sure, that can be helpful, just like a water fast can be helpful. Is there actually a better way to go about this? And we do our best as a team to look at what the best evidence tells us and see, okay, yeah, actually maybe getting into ketosis and cycling back into a longevity diet to confuse those cancer cells a little bit. Because as Jessica mentioned earlier, ketones, just like we use ketones, our healthy cells need energy. Cancer cells can feed off of ketones as well. Okay. I don't know if you want to add something, Jessica.
Okay, one last question. It is one-on-one. Thank you so much. Is fasting safe for blood cancer patients?
Yes, Katie and I were actually just talking about this yesterday. So blood cancer patients actually were included in those clinical trials that I mentioned. So the Vernieri and the Valdemarin, I definitely recommend that you look into those trials.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica and Katie, for being here with us today.